Jack Miller was enjoying his morning coffee at the local diner when his phone buzzed with a notification. The small device vibrated against the wooden table, making his spoon rattle against the side of his cup. Jack had been Clint Eastwood's personal assistant for the past 10 years, and he was used to handling unusual situations. His job involved managing the Hollywood legend's busy schedule, arranging meetings, and dealing with the occasional odd request from fans. But nothing had prepared him for what he saw on his screen that morning. "Judge orders Clint Eastwood's arrest," the headline read. Jack almost spilled his coffee as he quickly tapped on the notification. His eyes widened as he read the article. According to the news, Judge Richard Taylor had issued an arrest warrant for Clint Eastwood over a property dispute in Carmel, California, the coastal town where Eastwood had once served as mayor. "This can't be right," Jack muttered to himself. He dropped a $10 bill on the table and rushed out of the diner without waiting for his change. The cool morning air hit his face as he hurried to his car, already dialing Eastwood's number. "Mr. Eastwood, have you seen the news?" Jack asked as soon as the call connected. "Just waking up, Jack. What's going on?" Eastwood's voice was calm as always, showing no signs of concern yet. "Sir, there's a report saying Judge Taylor has ordered your arrest over some property issue in Carmel. It's all over the news." There was a pause on the line. Jack could almost picture the legendary actor's face, probably showing that famous squint as he processed the information. "That doesn't make any sense," Eastwood finally said. "The Carmel property issues were all settled years ago when I was mayor. This has to be some kind of mistake." "I think so too, sir," Jack agreed, starting his car. "I'm heading to the office now to get more information. Maybe we should call Alan." Alan Morris had been Eastwood's lawyer for decades, handling everything from movie contracts to personal matters. "Do that," Eastwood said. "And Jack, keep this quiet for now. No need to alarm the family until we know what's going on." Across town, Pam Bondi was in the middle of a client meeting when her secretary knocked on the door. Bondi had served as Attorney General before returning to private practice, and her reputation for handling high-profile cases made her one of the most sought-after lawyers in the country. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Bondi," her secretary said, "but there's an urgent call from Alan Morris. He says it's about Clint Eastwood." Bondi excused herself from the meeting and took the call in her private office. She listened carefully as Alan explained the situation. "This doesn't sound right, Alan," she said, already pulling up her computer to search for more information. "A judge can't just issue an arrest warrant for a civil property dispute without prior hearings or notices, especially one that was supposedly settled years ago." "That's why I'm calling you, Pam," Alan replied. "Something's fishy here, and with your background as AG and your connections in the court system, you might be able to get to the bottom of this faster than I can." "Send me everything you have," Bondi said, her mind already racing through the legal possibilities. "I'll look into it right away." After hanging up, Bondi asked her secretary to cancel her appointments for the day. She quickly reviewed the court order that Alan had forwarded to her email. Right away, she noticed several irregularities. The document was missing key official stamps. The case number format was unusual for that jurisdiction, and the language used in the order didn't match the formal legal writing typically used by Judge Taylor, whom she had appeared before in the past. Without hesitation, Bondi grabbed her briefcase and headed for her car. This wasn't just about helping a celebrity client. This was about a potential abuse of the legal system, something she had fought against throughout her career. Meanwhile, at Eastwood's production company, chaos was starting to unfold. News vans had already gathered outside the building, and phones were ringing nonstop. Jack arrived to find the receptionist overwhelmed with calls from reporters seeking comment. "Don't answer any of them," Jack instructed her. "Just take messages and tell them we'll issue a statement later." He hurried to his office and found 3 more assistants trying to manage the situation. One was monitoring social media, where the story was already trending. Another was fielding calls from concerned friends and family members. The third was trying to reach Eastwood's publicist, who was currently on a flight and unreachable. "Mr. Eastwood is on his way here," Jack told them. "Until he arrives, we say nothing to anyone. Is that clear?" Just as he finished speaking, his phone rang again. It was an unknown number, but Jack answered it anyway, hoping it might be someone with useful information. "This is Jack Miller, Mr. Eastwood's assistant," he said. "Mr. Miller, this is Pam Bondi," a confident female voice replied. "Alan Morris asked me to look into the situation with Judge Taylor. I believe there's something seriously wrong with this arrest order, and I need to speak with Mr. Eastwood as soon as possible." Jack felt a wave of relief wash over him. Bondi's reputation preceded her, and having her involved seemed like the best possible development. "Ms. Bondi, thank you for calling. Mr. Eastwood is on his way to the office now. Can you meet us here?" "I'd prefer somewhere more private," Bondi replied. "The media is already swarming, and we need to talk freely without worrying about who might be listening." Jack thought quickly. "There's a back entrance to the building through the parking garage. I'll text you the address and access code. I can have security meet you there." "Perfect, I'll be there in 20 minutes. By the time Eastwood arrived at the office, the situation had escalated even further. The story had made it to national news networks, and social media was ablaze with theories and opinions. Some people were defending Eastwood, while others were using the opportunity to criticize him for various perceived offenses over his long career. Eastwood himself remained remarkably calm as Jack briefed him on the latest developments, including Bondi's involvement. "I've known Pam for years," Eastwood said. "Good choice, Alan." He nodded approvingly. Frank Johnson, Eastwood's longtime friend and security consultant, arrived shortly after. He had already implemented their crisis protocol, securing the building, and setting up a private room where they could meet without interruptions. "The press is getting aggressive out there," Frank reported, "and we've received some concerning messages online. Until we know what's going on, I think we should consider moving you to a more secure location after this meeting." Eastwood nodded. Despite being in his 90s, he still had the same steely resolve that had made him a Hollywood icon. "Let's hear what Pam has to say first," he said. When Bondi arrived, she was escorted through the back entrance as planned. Security led her to the conference room where Eastwood, Jack, Frank, and Alan were waiting. "Mr. Eastwood," she said, extending her hand. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Call me Clint," he replied, shaking her hand firmly. "And I have a feeling you're about to make these circumstances a lot better." Bondi smiled confidently as she opened her briefcase and laid out several documents on the conference table. "Gentlemen," she said, "after reviewing the supposed arrest order, I'm convinced this is either a massive judicial error or, more likely, some kind of fraud. The document contains at least 7 procedural irregularities that any first-year law student would catch. Now the question is, who would want to create such chaos, and why?" As they all leaned in to look at the evidence Bondi had brought, none of them realized that this was just the beginning of a scandal that would soon rock the entire judicial system and turn a quiet property dispute into national news. By noon, the street outside Eastwood's production company was filled with news vans. Reporters stood in front of cameras, speaking quickly and pointing to the building behind them. The story about Judge Taylor's arrest warrant for Clint Eastwood had spread like wildfire. It was on every news channel, website, and social media platform. Susan Garcia stepped out of her white van with Los Angeles Times printed on the side. She had covered Hollywood news for 15 years and knew this was no ordinary celebrity story. Susan fixed her hair, straightened her blue blazer, and pushed through the crowd of reporters. Unlike many of her colleagues who were happy to report rumors, Susan wanted facts. "Excuse me, coming through," she said, making her way to the front of the crowd. A security guard stood at the entrance, arms crossed, face stern. "Press conference at 3 p.m., the guard said before Susan could even ask. No comments until then. Susan nodded but didn't leave. Instead, she walked around the side of the building, looking for another way in or someone who might talk. She had built her career on finding sources others couldn't. After circling the building, she noticed a young man exiting through a side darter carrying empty coffee cups. "Excuse me," Susan called out, approaching him with a friendly smile. "I'm Susan Garcia from the LA Times. Do you work for Mr. Eastwood?" The young man looked nervous. "I'm just an intern. I can't talk to the press." "I understand," Susan said. "But maybe you can just tell me about the mood inside. Is Mr. Eastwood there? Does he seem worried?" The intern hesitated. I shouldn't say anything. Off the record, Susan promised. I won't quote you or mention you at all. The intern looked around to make sure no one was watching. He's in there with some lawyers. Everyone's confused, but Mr. Eastwood seems calm. That's all. I know. Thank you, Susan said, quickly jotting notes in her small notebook. It wasn't much, but it was more than her competitors had. Inside the building, Pam Bondi was laying out her plan. First, we need to understand exactly what this warrant claims. Then we challenge its validity before Mr. Eastwood has to appear in court. Call me Clint, Eastwood reminded her again. Clint, Bondi corrected herself with a smile. I've asked my assistant to get the complete court file. Judge Taylor has always been by the book, so this unusual warrant doesn't make sense coming from him. Alan Morris, Eastwood's longtime lawyer, nodded in agreement. I've appeared before Taylor many times. This isn't his style at all. Jack Miller, who had been fielding calls nonstop, joined the conversation. The press is demanding a statement. What should I tell them? Bondi thought for a moment. Nothing specific yet. Just say Mr. Eastwood is aware of the reports, believes there's been a misunderstanding, and is working with legal counsel to resolve the situation. Frank Johnson, who had been quietly assessing security concerns, spoke up. We have another problem. Fans are starting to gather outside too. Some are supportive, but others seem angry. I'm worried about safety. We need a secure location, Bondi agreed. Somewhere private where we can work without interruption. I have a ranch about an hour from here, Eastwood suggested. Not many people know about it. Frank nodded. That could work. We'll need to be careful leaving here, though. The press will follow. I have an idea, Jack said. We can have a decoy car leave from the front while you exit through the garage in a different vehicle. While they planned their exit, social media was exploding with reactions. Celebrities posted messages supporting Eastwood. Film directors questioned the timing, as Eastwood was about to begin work on a new project. Political commentators from both sides weighed in, some suggesting the warrant was politically motivated. One post from famous actor Greg Harrison went viral. Clint Eastwood has given us 60 years of incredible films and served his community as mayor. He deserves respect and due process, not a public spectacle. Outside the courthouse where Judge Taylor worked, another group of reporters had gathered. They hoped to get a statement from the judge about why he had issued the warrant, but Taylor had canceled his appearances for the day and was not responding to questions. Court clerk Nancy Wilson was overwhelmed with calls. No, the judge will not be commenting, she repeated for what felt like the 100th time. This is an ongoing legal matter. After hanging up, Nancy walked to the break room for coffee. Her co-worker, Eric Powell, was there looking at his phone. This Eastwood thing is crazy, Eric said. Have you seen the actual warrant? Nancy shook her head. No, and that's strange. Usually I process all of Judge Taylor's orders, but I never saw this one. Eric raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound right. I know, Nancy agreed. But when I mentioned it to the judge's assistant, she just said it was handled directly by the judge. Eric took a sip of his coffee. The whole thing feels off to me. Back at Eastwood's office, the plan was in motion. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the front entrance, causing reporters to rush forward with cameras ready. Security guards pushed them back as a man in a hat and sunglasses quickly got into the vehicle. The SUV drove away with several news vans following. Meanwhile, in the underground garage, Eastwood, Bondi, and Frank got into a simple white sedan driven by one of Frank's security team. They exited through a service entrance on the opposite side of the building. No reporters were there to see them leave. That should buy us some time, Frank said as they drove away. The decoy will lead them on a long drive before stopping at a hotel. By then we'll be at the ranch. Bondi's phone rang. It was her assistant, Olivia Green. Ms. Bondi, I've got the court file, but there's something very strange, Olivia said. The warrant doesn't appear in the official system. I had to get a paper copy from the clerk's office, and it doesn't have the proper filing stamps. Take pictures and send them to me right away, Bondi instructed. And Olivia, don't tell anyone else about this. After hanging up, Bondi turned to Eastwood. I think we're dealing with more than just a misunderstanding. This warrant may be fraudulent. Eastwood's expression remained calm, but his eyes showed concern. Who would do such a thing, and why? That's what we need to find out, Bondi replied. As they drove to the ranch, Jack handled the promised press statement. Standing before the crowd of reporters, he read from a prepared text. Mr. Eastwood is aware of the reported arrest warrant. He believes this is a misunderstanding and is working with legal counsel to resolve the situation. He has great respect for the legal system and is confident this matter will be cleared up quickly. We will not be taking questions at this time. Susan Garcia watched carefully, noticing that Jack didn't confirm where Eastwood was or mention Pam Bondi's involvement. Her instincts told her there was much more to the story. After the brief statement, while other reporters shouted questions, Susan slipped away to make some calls. She had a contact in the court clerk's office who might be able to provide more information. At the courthouse, Eric Powell had started looking into the warrant himself. As a junior clerk, he didn't have full access to all systems, but he knew enough to check the basic filing records. What he found troubled him. There was no digital record of the warrant in the system, even though all court documents were supposed to be logged electronically. Eric debated whether to tell someone about his discovery. Judge Taylor was known for being strict with employees who overstepped their boundaries, but this seemed important enough to risk it. He decided to look into it a bit more before saying anything. The white sedan carrying Eastwood, Bondi, and Frank arrived at the ranch. It was a beautiful property surrounded by trees, providing natural privacy. Once inside, Bondi set up a makeshift office in the living room, spreading documents across the large wooden table. Olivia's photos confirm my suspicions, she said, showing them the images on her tablet. This warrant lacks proper authentication markers, and look at the signature. Frank and Eastwood leaned in to see. Is that supposed to be Judge Taylor's signature? Frank asked. Yes, but compare it to this, Bondi said, pulling up another document. This is his actual signature from a case I handled last year. They're similar, but there are clear differences. So, someone forged a court order, Eastwood said, his voice a mix of relief and anger. Why would anyone do that? I don't know yet, Bondi replied, but I intend to find out. And when I do, whoever is behind this will face serious consequences for falsifying court documents. As night fell, the story continued to dominate the news. Speculation ran wild, with theories ranging from political vendettas to personal grudges. But in a quiet ranch house away from the cameras and noise, Pam Bondi was building a case that would soon shock everyone involved. The next morning, the county courthouse was busier than usual. People lined up outside hoping to get a seat in the courtroom. News vans parked along the street, and reporters did live broadcasts from the courthouse steps. Everyone wanted to see what would happen with the Clint Eastwood case. Pam Bondi arrived early, walking confidently through the security checkpoint. She wore a navy blue suit and carried a leather briefcase. Her assistant, Olivia Green, followed close behind, struggling. With 3 heavy binders full of documents, court cases, and legal precedents, Bondi had stayed up most of the night preparing her arguments. Are you sure Mr. Eastwood shouldn't be here? Olivia whispered as they walked down the hallway. Absolutely, Bondi replied. We're challenging the validity of the warrant itself. He doesn't need to appear until we determine if this is even legitimate. They entered the courtroom, which was already filling with journalists and curious onlookers. Bondi noticed Susan Garcia from the Los Angeles Times sitting in the front row, notebook ready. The reporter gave her a small nod of recognition. At exactly 9 a.m., the bailiff called out, All rise. The Honorable Judge Richard Taylor presiding. Judge Taylor entered the courtroom, his black robe flowing behind him. He was in his 60s with gray hair and glasses. His face showed no emotion as he took his seat at the bench. Be seated, he said, his voice firm. I understand we have a motion regarding the Eastwood matter. Bondi stood up. Yes, Your Honor. Pam Bondi representing Mr. Clint Eastwood. I've filed an emergency motion to dismiss the arrest warrant issued under Your Honor's name. Judge Taylor looked at her over his glasses. Proceed, Ms. Bondi. Bondi moved to the podium at the center of the courtroom. Your Honor, I move for an immediate dismissal of this warrant on multiple grounds. Her voice was steady and confident, filling the silent courtroom. First, the warrant cites a property dispute in Carmel, California as its basis. However, all property matters involving Mr. Eastwood in Carmel were fully resolved years ago, as documented in these settlement agreements. She handed a document to the court clerk, who passed it to the judge. Judge Taylor examined the papers, with a frown. These appear to be in order. Continue. Second, Your Honor, an arrest warrant for a civil property matter is highly unusual and inappropriate. Such disputes are typically handled through civil proceedings, not criminal arrests. The judge nodded slightly, his expression unchanged. Third, and most concerning, Bondi continued, there are serious questions about the authenticity of this warrant. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Judge Taylor banged his gavel once. Order, he said firmly. Bondi opened one of the binders Olivia had placed on the table. Your Honor, I've prepared a detailed analysis of the document in question. The paper quality, watermark, and filing stamps do not match official court documents from this jurisdiction. Furthermore, the signature on the warrant shows notable differences from Your Honor's known signature on other court documents. She approached the bench and presented another set of documents, showing side-by-side comparisons of the signatures. Judge Taylor studied them carefully, his frown deepening. These are serious allegations, Ms. Bondi. Are you suggesting someone forged my signature on an official court document? Yes, Your Honor. That is exactly what I'm suggesting, Bondi replied. Additionally, when my assistant attempted to locate this case in the court's electronic filing system, she found no record of it. This raises further questions about the legitimacy of the entire proceeding. The courtroom was completely silent now. Even the journalists had stopped typing, hanging on every word. Your Honor, Bondi continued, I have here a complete history of Mr. Eastwood's property dealings in Carmel, including his time as mayor. All disputes were resolved through proper legal channels, with full compliance on Mr. Eastwood's part. There is simply no legal basis for this warrant. As Bondi presented her case, Eric Powell, the junior clerk who had noticed irregularities the day before, sat at the back of the courtroom. He had debated whether to come forward with what he knew, but decided he needed to see how things unfolded first. Watching Bondi methodically dismantle the basis for the warrant, he felt increasingly certain that his suspicions were correct. Judge Taylor listened carefully to Bondi's arguments, occasionally asking questions or requesting clarification. The district attorney, who normally would defend the court's actions, seemed confused by the whole situation and had little to offer in response to Bondi's points. After an hour of legal arguments, Bondi concluded her presentation. Your Honor, based on these factors, the resolution of all relevant property disputes, the inappropriate use of an arrest warrant for a civil matter, and serious questions about the document's authenticity, I respectfully request that this warrant be dismissed immediately. Judge Taylor removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Ms. Bondi, you've raised some troubling issues here. Before I rule on your motion, I want to address something directly. I have no recollection of issuing this warrant. In fact, I was not even assigned to any cases involving Mr. Eastwood. A gasp went through the courtroom. Reporters began frantically typing on their phones and laptops. Order! Judge Taylor called out, banging his gavel again. This court will have order. When the room quieted, he continued. I want to examine the original warrant document and check our systems. We will take a 30-minute recess. As the judge left the courtroom, the room erupted in conversation. Bondi turned to Olivia with a small smile. That went well, she said, quietly. He basically admitted he didn't issue the warrant, Olivia whispered back excitedly. Yes, but we still need to find out who did and why, Bondi replied. Across the courtroom, Susan Garcia approached them. Ms. Bondi, would you care to comment on the judge's statement? Not at this time, Bondi replied professionally. Let's wait for the court's ruling. During the recess, Eric Powell finally made his decision. He approached the bailiff and asked to speak with the judge in private. The bailiff gave him a suspicious look, but went to deliver the message. Meanwhile, in the hallway outside the courtroom, Bondi made a quick call to Eastwood. How's it going? Eastwood asked, his voice calm as usual. Very well, Bondi replied. The judge seems as confused about this warrant as we are. He's admitted he doesn't remember issuing it. That's good news, Eastwood said. Any idea who might be behind this? Not yet, but I think we're about to find out. Inside the judge's chambers, Eric Powell nervously explained what he had discovered. Your Honor, I noticed something strange in the computer logs yesterday. Someone accessed the system using your credentials at 2:15 a.m. 3 days ago. According to the court schedule, you were presiding over a trial at that time. Judge Taylor's eyes widened. That's impossible. I was in court all day and certainly not working in the middle of the night. Exactly, Eric said. I think someone may have hacked into the system using your login information. The judge picked up his phone and called the court's IT security team. When court resumed, Judge Taylor's face was stern. The courtroom fell silent as he began to speak. Based on new information that has just come to my attention, I am not only dismissing the warrant against Mr. Eastwood, but also ordering an immediate investigation into a potential breach of our court's computer system. He turned to look directly at Bondi. Ms. Bondi, your motion is granted. The warrant is vacated, and I offer my apologies to Mr. Eastwood for this unfortunate situation. Bondi nodded respectfully. Thank you, Your Honor. But Judge Taylor wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am issuing an order for a full security audit of our digital systems. It appears someone may have illegally accessed the system and issued fraudulent orders under my name. This is a serious criminal matter that will be fully investigated. As the judge continued explaining the situation, a court officer approached the bench and handed him a note. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Taylor read it, his expression shifting from stern to alarmed. This court will take an immediate recess, he announced abruptly. Ms. Bondi, would you please join me in my chambers? The bailiff will clear the courtroom. As people were ushered out, Bondi gathered her materials and followed the judge. Olivia tried to come along, but the bailiff stopped her. Just Ms. Bondi, he said firmly. In the judge's chambers, Bondi found not only Judge Taylor but also the court's chief of security and a stern-looking woman in a suit who was introduced as the head of the FBI's cybercrime division. Ms. Bondi, Judge Taylor said, what I'm about to tell you must remain confidential for now. It appears this situation is much more serious than we initially thought. The FBI agent stepped forward. We have reason to believe this wasn't just about Mr. Eastwood. We've discovered evidence of a larger attack on the court's systems, possibly targeting multiple high-profile individuals. The Eastwood warrant was just the first to be executed. Bondi's legal mind raced with the implications. So someone is targeting celebrities or public figures through fraudulent court orders. To what end? That's what we need to find out, the agent replied. And we may need your help and Mr. Eastwood's to catch whoever is behind this. While Pam Bondi was meeting with Judge Taylor and the FBI agent, the courtroom remained empty except for Eric Powell. The young clerk sat alone, nervously tapping his foot against the floor. He had taken a big risk by coming forward with what he knew, and now he wondered if he had done the right thing. His boss might be angry that he had looked into court records without permission, but Eric knew that staying silent would have been worse. The door opened, and a court officer entered. Mr. Powell, Judge Taylor wants to see you in his chambers. Eric stood up, his heart beating fast. Am I in trouble? The officer shook his head. No. You did good, kid. In Judge Taylor's chambers, Bondi was discussing strategy with the judge and FBI agent Lisa Martinez when Eric entered the room. Mr. Powell, Judge Taylor said, please tell Agent Martinez exactly what you told me about the system access. Eric explained again how he had noticed unusual activity in the system logs. I was updating case files yesterday when I saw a login. Records showing someone had accessed the system using Judge Taylor's credentials at 2:15 a.m. 3 days ago. I thought it was strange because judges don't usually work in the middle of the night. Agent Martinez nodded, taking notes. What made you check the logs in the first place? It was after I heard about the Eastwood warrant, Eric replied. My co-worker Nancy mentioned that she hadn't processed the paperwork, which was unusual. All of Judge Taylor's orders go through proper channels, so I got curious and looked into it. And you said there were other unusual activities? The agent asked. Yes, Eric continued. Once I started looking, I found several instances where the system was accessed late at night using different judges' credentials, always between 1 and 3 a.m. when nobody would be working. Agent Martinez looked up from her notes. This is very helpful, Mr. Powell. We'll need you to work with our cybersecurity team to identify all instances of suspicious access. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, reporters were growing restless. The sudden recess in Bondi's private meeting with the judge had sparked new rumors. Susan Garcia stood apart from the other journalists, making calls to her sources. She had built a reputation for digging deeper than her competitors, and she sensed there was much more to this story than a simple misunderstanding. Her phone rang, and she answered quickly. Garcia. Susan, it's Nancy from the clerk's office, a quiet voice said. I can't talk long, but I thought you should know something. I'm listening, Susan replied, moving further away from the crowd. Eric, the junior clerk, found something in the computer system. He went to speak with Judge Taylor, privately. Then the FBI showed up. Something big is happening. FBI, Susan repeated, scribbling in her notebook. Do you know what Eric found? Not exactly, but it has to do with unauthorized access to the court's computer system. And Susan, it's not just about Eastwood. There are other names involved. Before Susan could ask more questions, Nancy hung up. Susan stared at her phone, mind racing. This was no longer just a celebrity story. It was potentially a major criminal case involving the court system itself. Back in Judge Taylor's chambers, Bondi was on the phone with Eastwood, updating him on the situation. The FBI believes someone hacked into the court system and issued fraudulent orders, she explained. Yours wasn't the only one, just the first to be executed. Who else was targeted? Eastwood asked. They're still figuring that out, Bondi replied. But they want your help. My help? What can I do? They want to use this situation to catch whoever is behind it. If we publicly act like the warrant is still being challenged but not yet dismissed, it might draw out the perpetrator. There was a pause on the line. So basically use me as bait? In a way, yes, Bondi admitted. But with full protection and control of the situation, we would know everything that's happening while they wouldn't know we're onto them. I'll do it, Eastwood said without hesitation. If someone's attacking our court system, they need to be stopped. As Bondi ended the call, Agent Martinez was working with Eric and the court's IT team to examine the system logs in detail. They had set up a makeshift command center in a conference room next to the judge's chambers. Look at this pattern, Eric said, pointing to the screen. The same IP address accessed the system before each of the suspicious logins. The IT specialist nodded. Good catch. Let's trace that IP. After several minutes of technical work, the specialist looked up with surprise. It's coming from inside the courthouse network. Whoever did this works here or has physical access to the building. Agent Martinez immediately ordered a check of all key card entries to the courthouse during the suspicious time frames. We need to know who was in the building during those late-night hours. As they worked, Judge Taylor and Bondi crafted a carefully worded statement to release to the press. It needed to reveal enough to satisfy the media but not tip off the hacker that they were under investigation. We'll say that the court is reviewing the warrant and related documentation, and that a decision will be announced tomorrow, Judge Taylor suggested. And we should add that Mr. Eastwood has agreed to appear in court tomorrow to address the matter, Bondi added. That will make it seem like the warrant is still being treated as valid. The judge nodded in agreement. That should work. Outside, Judge Taylor delivered the statement to the waiting press. Reporters shouted questions, but the judge simply repeated that no further comments would be made until the next day. Susan Garcia watched carefully, noting that the judge's wording was oddly vague. He never actually confirmed that he had issued the warrant in the first place. Something didn't add up. As the day continued, the FBI and court IT team made progress. The key card log showed only one person had entered the building during all the suspicious time frames. Peter Walsh, a former IT specialist who had been fired 6 months earlier, but somehow still had an active access card. We need to find Walsh, Agent Martinez said. And we need to know why he's targeting these specific individuals. Eric, who had been searching through personnel records, spoke up. I think I found something. Walsh was fired after a complaint from a court security contractor, a company owned by Wilson Entertainment Group. Wilson Entertainment? Bondi asked. That's George Wilson's company. He's a major film producer who's worked with Eastwood and many other celebrities. Agent Martinez nodded. Let's look at the other names on the target list. The team reviewed the fraudulent orders that had been prepared but not yet filed. They included warrants, property liens, and other legal actions against several high-profile individuals, all of whom had connections to Wilson Entertainment. This is looking like revenge, Agent Martinez said. Walsh lost his job because of Wilson's company, and now he's using the court system to target Wilson and his associates. But why start with Eastwood? Bondi asked. Eric pulled up a news article on his computer. Look at this. 3 days before the first hack, Wilson announced that Eastwood would direct his new film. It made headlines in the entertainment news. So Walsh saw that and decided to start with Eastwood, Agent Martinez concluded, probably to cause maximum publicity and embarrassment. As they pieced together the motive, the IT specialist made another discovery. We've got his current location. Walsh is accessing the system right now from a coffee shop downtown. Agent Martinez immediately dispatched a team to apprehend Walsh. Keep him online. Don't do anything that might alert him that we've tracked him. In the coffee shop, Peter Walsh sat in a corner, his laptop open. He was unaware that FBI agents were quietly entering the building and positioning themselves around him. He continued typing, preparing his next fraudulent court order. One of the agents, disguised as a barista, approached his table. Refill, sir? Walsh looked up. No, I'm fine. Before he could finish his sentence, other agents moved in, identifying themselves as FBI. Walsh tried to close his laptop, but it was too late. He was handcuffed and his computer seized as evidence. Back at the courthouse, the team received confirmation of Walsh's arrest. Agent Martinez smiled for the first time that day. We got him. Good work, everyone. Judge Taylor turned to Eric. Mr. Powell, your attention to detail and willingness to speak up made this possible. The court owes you a debt of gratitude. Eric blushed, not used to such praise. I just did what seemed right. As the day ended, Bondi called Eastwood again. It's over. They caught the guy, a former court employee with a grudge against George Wilson and his associates. You were just the first target because of the publicity your name would generate. Well, that's a relief, Eastwood said. Though, I have to admit it was almost exciting to be a fugitive at my age. Bondi laughed. Your fugitive days are officially over. The judge has completely vacated the warrant and wants to apologize to you personally. No need for that, Eastwood replied. He was a victim in this too. Tell him I understand and there are no hard feelings. As Bondi ended the call, she realized that this case had revealed a serious vulnerability in the court systems, one that could have caused much more damage if not caught in time. Tomorrow she would need to address the press and explain what had happened, while being careful not to reveal details that might inspire copycat crimes. For now, though, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Justice had prevailed, even when the system itself had been compromised. The next morning, the courthouse was surrounded by even more reporters and curious onlookers than the day before. Everyone wanted to hear the official explanation of what had happened with the Clint Eastwood arrest warrant. News trucks lined the street, their satellite dishes pointed skyward to broadcast live. Inside the building, final preparations were underway for the press conference. Judge Richard Taylor sat in his office, reviewing the statement he would make. He adjusted his tie nervously. In his 30 years on the bench, he had never faced a situation like this. Are you ready, Your Honor? His assistant asked, poking her head through the door. As ready as I'll ever be, the judge replied, standing up. In a conference room down the hall, Pam Bondi was having a final conversation with FBI agent Lisa Martinez. How much should we reveal about the hacking? Bondi asked. Only the basics, Agent Martinez replied. We don't want to give anyone ideas. Just explain that the court system was compromised and that safeguards are now being put in place, Bondi nodded. And what about Walsh's motives? We can disclose his connection to Wilson Entertainment and the revenge angle. That's already leaking to the press anyway. Susan Garcia from the LA Times somehow found out about the connection. That woman is good at her job, Bondi said with a mix of admiration and frustration. At 10 a.m. sharp, the press conference began in the courthouse's main lobby. A podium had been set up with microphones from various news outlets. Cameras flashed as Judge Taylor took his position, flanked by Bondi and Agent Martinez. Court officials and security personnel stood nearby. "Good morning," Judge Taylor began, his voice firm despite his nervousness. "I am here to address the situation regarding the purported arrest warrant for Mr. Clint Eastwood that was reported in the media." The room fell silent as reporters leaned forward, eager to catch every word. "I want to state clearly and for the record, I did not issue any such warrant. The document in question was fraudulently created by someone who illegally accessed our court's computer system." Murmurs spread through the crowd of journalists. Thanks to the quick action of Ms. Pam Bondi, Mr. Eastwood's attorney, and the diligence of our court staff, particularly Clerk Eric Powell, this fraud was discovered before any serious harm could occur. Judge Taylor then introduced Agent Martinez, who stepped forward to explain the FBI's involvement. "Yesterday we arrested Peter Walsh, a former IT specialist at this courthouse, for computer fraud and falsifying court documents. Mr. Walsh used his knowledge of the court systems to create fake legal orders, not just against Mr. Eastwood, but potentially targeting several other high-profile individuals as well." A reporter raised his hand. "Why did he do it?" Agent Martinez answered carefully. "Our investigation indicates that Mr. Walsh was seeking revenge against George Wilson of Wilson Entertainment Group, who was connected to Walsh's termination from the court 6 months ago. He targeted Mr. Eastwood first because of his recent association with Wilson on an upcoming film project." Susan Garcia spoke up. "Is it true that Walsh still had an active access card to the building 6 months after being fired? Doesn't that represent a serious security failure?" Judge Taylor looked uncomfortable but answered honestly. "Yes, that was a significant oversight on our part. We are conducting a complete review of our security protocols to ensure nothing like this happens again." Next, it was Bondi's turn to speak. She approached the podium with the confidence that had made her a successful attorney general before entering private practice. "Mr. Eastwood has asked me to convey that he bears no ill will toward the court for this incident. He understands that the court itself was a victim of this fraud. He is grateful to Judge Taylor and the FBI for their swift action in resolving the matter." Cameras flashed continuously as Bondi continued. "This incident highlights vulnerabilities that exist in our increasingly digital legal system. But it also shows that with proper vigilance and courage from individuals like Eric Powell, such attacks can be detected and stopped." After the formal statements, reporters shouted questions which the officials answered one by one. The press conference lasted nearly an hour, with every detail of the case explained except those that might compromise security or ongoing investigations. Meanwhile, at his ranch, Clint Eastwood watched the press conference on television. He sat in a comfortable chair, sipping coffee, his expression thoughtful. Though he was relieved the ordeal was over, something about the whole situation still bothered him. His phone rang. It was Jack Miller, his assistant. "Have you seen the news?" Jack asked excitedly. "They caught the guy." "I'm watching the press conference now," Eastwood replied. "Good work getting Bondi involved. She really came through for us. She's getting a lot of attention for this case," Jack said. "I've already had calls from 3 major networks wanting to interview her about how she uncovered the fraud. She deserves the recognition," Eastwood said. "Make sure to send her something nice as a thank you." After ending the call, Eastwood picked up another phone, a secure line that few people had the number for. He dialed and waited. "Hello, Clint," George Wilson answered. "I guess you've heard they caught Walsh." "I'm watching the press conference right now," Eastwood said. "You know, George, when I agreed to direct your new film, I didn't expect to get dragged into your personal vendettas." Wilson sighed. "I had no idea Walsh would do something like this. He was fired because he was stealing company data, not because..." Of some personal issue with me. Well, it became personal for him, Eastwood replied, and I got caught in the crossfire. Are you still on board for the film? Wilson asked, a note of worry in his voice. Eastwood paused, letting the producer sweat a little. Yes, I'm still directing, but I want better security on set, and I want approval of all press releases before they go out. Done, Wilson agreed, quickly. Whatever you need. After the call ended, Eastwood smiled slightly. Even at his age, he still knew how to negotiate from a position of strength. Back at the courthouse, as the press conference wrapped up, Eric Powell found himself surrounded by reporters asking about his role in uncovering the fraud. The shy clerk was overwhelmed by the attention. Bondi noticed his discomfort and stepped in. Mr. Powell acted with integrity and intelligence. The court is lucky to have him. She deftly guided him away from the press and toward a quieter hallway. Thank you, Eric said, relief evident in his voice. You did good work, Bondi told him. Have you ever considered a career in law? People with your attention to detail make excellent attorneys. Eric looked surprised. I'm actually in night school for law right now. Working here helps pay for it. Bondi smiled and handed him her card. When you graduate, give me a call. My firm is always looking for sharp minds. In the days that followed, the story gradually faded from the headlines, replaced by newer scandals and breaking news. Peter Walsh was charged with multiple federal crimes related to computer fraud and falsifying court documents. He faced up to 20 years in prison. The court implemented new security measures, including better management of access cards and enhanced monitoring of after-hours system access. Judge Taylor personally oversaw these changes, determined to prevent similar breaches in the future. Clint Eastwood returned to work on his new film, the brief controversy actually increasing public interest in the project. Ticket pre-sales broke records when the film was announced. Pam Bondi's reputation as a formidable attorney grew even stronger. Her quick thinking and thorough investigation had not only helped Eastwood, but had potentially protected many others from becoming victims of Walsh's revenge scheme. Susan Garcia wrote a detailed series about the case for the Los Angeles Times, earning consideration for a journalism award. Her articles focused not just on the celebrity angle, but on the larger issues of digital security in the justice system. And in Carmel, California, where Eastwood had once served as mayor, locals hung a banner across Main Street that read, "Justice served, welcome home, Mayor Eastwood." When Eastwood visited the town a month later for a charity event, residents greeted him with cheers and support, showing that even in times of confusion and false accusations, the truth eventually finds its way to the surface. As Eastwood stood on the stage at the charity event, looking out at the friendly faces of people who had known him for decades, he felt a deep appreciation for the justice system that, despite its flaws, had worked correctly in the end. It reminded him of a line from one of his movies. It's what people know about themselves inside that makes them afraid. Peter Walsh's fear and anger had driven him to abuse the system, but courage and integrity had ultimately prevailed.